I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, welcome back to coverage of the DAYBELL trial. The verdict is apparently in. Family members have been informed. So we are going to Shaker make evening where you are. You in the UK. So I must say, I thought that the verdict would come this afternoon. I thought it would be later, like maybe closer to 4 o'clock. But you can imagine the jurors have sat in on this case for 2 months. Would they have wanted to prolong it over the whole weekend? Certainly, that I think is one scenario. But I think the other scenario is at what point was it becoming clear what the situation was with Chad Abel? We're not dealing with one murder, we're dealing with three. We're dealing with three bodies in his backyard. Well, two buried in his backyard, one um, that was sort of found in the house in the cupboard. But I mean, that is it's not there's certainly not a lack of evidence, right? Chelsea, thanks for joining us. So I'll obviously head on over to the uh, live stream from Judge Boyce as soon as it starts. It's not quite. Uh, it's 2 o'clock in about 30 seconds. But this is what we're seeing at the moment. As soon as that goes live, then we will move on to that. I hope you guys are having an okay weekend. I was quite kind of amused to see some of you on my chat at what was it, 9:30 this morning. Obviously, you may have thought, well, I know something, but obviously, um, you've got to set the timer to some time. So that was really what that was all about. If the jury were taking longer to reach a verdict, what do you think that would suggest? In other words, if it takes shorter to reach a verdict in a case like this, what do you think that means? If it if they let's say they deliberated Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, what do you think that would have suggested? Patricia Young from Texas, good to see you here. Leah, good to see you. Suze F from Washington State, good to see you. So, for those who don't know, I've just posted a video on, and I must say I find that so disturbing. You know, the children testifying about Tammy being in a weakened state. It's hard to know the truth about that, but certainly a fit that seems to indicate that she wasn't. That if anything, her um, activity was increasing towards the end of her life. And if I have to disappear from this world, in a suspicious circumstances, please look at my Strava. My Strava will show how my activity is also increasing, and I want to live and I want to be active and so on. So that you've often got to look at that kind of detail and not really take necessarily what other people say about you, right? Um, one wonders how much they got done on what is it, Wednesday afternoon in that hour or so. Did they start with a poll? Was they were they close to consensus then? Was there anyone with doubts, or was it pretty much a formality? It does. That's certainly how I feel. Certainly how I feel. So we are now at a couple of minutes past 2 o'clock local time. Um, Candace says she sounds so much better. Well, so the good news is I am going to PrimeCon. I had a great sleep last night, but still not quite out of the woods yet, but I think one more night's sleep should do the trick, hopefully. Oh, okay, there we go. There we go. So the judge has yet to enter the courtroom, and I guess the jury as well. Chad is seated. It looks like he's wearing a yellow tie, and is that a light blue shirt or a white shirt? I think it looks like a slightly light blue or perhaps gray shirt.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Pale blue, I agree.
All right, I apologize. It'll take me a moment here to get logged on and then we'll get started.
This case started October of 2019. It's almost 5 years later that justice is at last coming to this case. Laurie Vella was convicted last year, around about this time, and a full year later, it's Chad's turn. How long did it take for the jury to deliberate? Probably around 4 or 5 hours, I would say to guess. 1 or 2 hours
Okay,
last
we're on the
night.
record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The court's been advised that the jury has reached a verdict. The court will note the parties are present. The state's present with Mr. Wood, Ms. Blake, Mr. Wixom, and Ms. Beatty. Mr. Pryor's here representing the defendant, Mr. Daybell. And the court at this time is going to instruct the jurors to please be brought into the courtroom. That will include our alternate jurors as well to be seated. And then I will have the marshal get the verdict form from the jury once they return to the courtroom. So if they can come in at this time, we'll have them brought in.
So Chad is a prophet. I wonder whether he knows what verdict is awaiting him. Something that I don't know for sure is whether would the attorneys have been informed of what the verdict is, or are they told at the same time we are? I think they would know the outcome before we do somehow. Look at Mr. Pryor looking, I think, fairly guarded.
Here's all President Counter for you, Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Doesn't seem to be much swagger with Pryor, but I guess, could you see that with the prosecution?
All right, the court's going to next just make a reference that there is a courtroom conduct order in effect in this proceeding to remain in effect. So I appreciate everyone complying with that order, as most of you have done throughout the proceedings in this case. At this time, then, the first matter I'd like to take up is to do a roll call of the jury for the record. So, Madam Clerk, if you could please conduct a roll call of our jury to make sure they're all present and properly seated at this time.
Juror number 1, red card number 27. Juror number 2, red card number 219. Juror number 4, red card number 631. Juror number 5, red card number 653. Juror number 7, red card number 752. Juror number 8, red card 1680. Juror number 9, red card number 823.
Here.
Juror number 10, red card 1358. Juror number 11, red card 1365. Juror number 12, red card 716. Juror number 14, red card 997. And juror number 15, red card 1078.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for conducting the roll call.
Thanks, Gaynor.
At this time, I'm next going to inquire from the jury foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? All right, thank you. Mr. Bailiff, if you would please retrieve the verdict from the jury foreperson. Thank you. All right, the court has reviewed the verdict form. I'll note that all counts have been properly marked, as well as the verdict form's been properly dated and signed by the foreperson. The next step then is Mr. Daybell, if you and counsel would please rise, I'm going to have the clerk read the verdict.
In the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho and for the County of Fremont. State of Idaho plaintiff versus Chad Guy Daybell defendant, case number CR 22211623. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tamara Tammy Daybell? Guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 6 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tamara Tammy Daybell? Guilty. Question number 7. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of insurance fraud? Guilty. Question number 8. In regards to count 8 of the amended indictment, in regards to count 9 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of insurance fraud? Guilty. Dated this 30th day of May, 2024, and signed by the presiding juror.
All right, Madam Clerk, thank you for reading the verdict. At this time, I'm just going to collectively ask the jurors, all of you, is this in fact your unanimous verdict on each of those counts? Very well. At this time, I'm going to inquire if the parties wish to have the jury polled. Does the state wish to have the jury polled?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Does the defense, Mr. Pryor, wish to have the jury polled?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well, then. I'm going to direct the clerk to record the verdict. At this time, then, this does conclude the guilt phase of this trial. Because the defendant has been convicted on counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, the state has filed a notice of intent to seek the death penalty, and so a second phase of this trial, called the sentencing phase, will be taking place next. We're going to take a recess at this time for approximately an hour. We will come back on the record and begin with the start of that sentencing phase of the trial. I would like to remind everyone that this courtroom conduct order is still in application throughout these proceedings. Thank you all for complying with that. We are going to take that recess at this time. Mr. Daybell is to remain in custody at this time for the commencement of the sentencing phase. And with that, thank you all, and we will be in recess.
All right, please.
Right, so there you have it. Now, as I understand it, the sentencing will be this afternoon will be to deal with the dates for that sentencing trial. I know in the case of Caitlin Armstrong, they actually dealt with the sentencing right then and there. So that was how it was done in Texas. I don't know whether we're going to have a date necessarily set for a separate series of hearings, but I really don't think we're going to have sentencing this afternoon. Certainly not the way I understand it. Remember, Lori Vallow had a separate sentencing date that was a couple of months later after the verdict, and I presume it's going to be the same. A sentencing trial, when it comes to a death penalty case, tends to be almost like a whole separate trial. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. Will Chad get the death penalty? Well, after these verdicts, unanimous, guilty on all counts, the needle has certainly shifted in that direction. I'm not sure if you guys could have seen Chad's demeanor, seen his expression. I thought what I thought were two big gulps, and I don't know if you noticed he had his chin up. Chad's got quite a. My impression of Chad is that he's got low self-esteem, but yet he projects pride, if that's the word. He projects himself to be someone with, I guess, reasonable confidence, but certainly not much show of emotion from Chad there. Earlier today, I made a video about the DAYBELL children and just the comment I think Emma made where she said, "I've never seen my father so distressed in my whole life." And I couldn't help thinking that Chad strikes me as an emotionless person. That doesn't mean he doesn't have emotion, just that he doesn't show, he strikes me kind of as an introvert. Yeah, as Pauline Buckles says, it won't bring back the victims, but justice was served. I don't think there were any surprises here. I don't think anyone thought that there would not be a guilty verdict. We now no longer need to say the alleged murderer or alleged perpetrator. It is official now. T. Cancella says, I was watching the TCRS video about the adult kids when the verdict came in. One aspect that has not really been put on trial is the belief system. It's almost like that got a pass by virtually everyone. And I do think that is a subject we maybe need to talk about in more detail. Why did such a serious crime emerge out of the fabric that it emerged from? Is that just by accident? Is the onus really on the person that is Chad Daybell and the person that is Lori Vallow? Or is it a combination of personality and belief? The puppeteer can, and the reason why I think it's important to talk about that is, what if Chad goes to jail and Lori goes to jail, prison, right? You're in jail while your case is being heard, you go to prison once you've been sentenced. Why is it important to deal with that? Well, is it okay if everyone just goes back to whatever they thought to begin with? Is it okay, are the originating beliefs the driving forces not to be held to account as well? What do you guys think? What is great points about factors of, yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, so I think court is going to resume in about an hour. So I think I'm gonna also go offline. Maybe I think I'll return when court resumes. So should actually say court will resume a little bit later. Leah says, should Mel and her husband go on trial? I don't know. I think not. I think you would look at the people who decided someone went dark and did something about it. If you think about it, this is a case that involves a gravedigger, a hairdresser, and a washed-up stand-up comedian. It's something you couldn't really make up. But the point is, they were almost all three kind of unemployed at the time, all three not really making a decent living. Of all three of these people, I would say the person who was the most functional and earning a living was probably Tammy. Chad was trying to make a living selling books. I doubt whether he was. I doubt whether he was able to provide for his family, let alone for himself, given what I've seen in terms of his book sales. Yeah, Alex definitely would have been charged as well. Stephanie says, my son has a chorus concert tonight, so I will miss the second live tonight. Hope you are feeling improved. There won't be a second live tonight. I'm just saying there might be. I'll put this live into a kind of pause mode and then come back when the court resumes. So there won't be a second live. But Stephanie, congrats on your son's graduation, I think it is. And I've been getting certain things from other TCRS fans, sons making graduation speeches. It's all quite heartwarming to see. It's good to see that. I feel like maybe my influence has filtered into the critical thinking potentially of some of the youngsters that are out there, through you guys. So that's good to see. Bria, good to see you here as well. It's Bria tuning in from France. That is kind of the summary of this whole story. But didn't Chris Watts do exactly the same thing? So I made a comment that if Chad had been wealthy, I don't think this would have happened. He would have gotten divorced and so on and so on. And someone disagreed with that and said, no, he would have had to murder Tammy in order to marry Laurie. And I can understand that from the perspective of, if you in this religion where you're not allowed to get divorced and so on. But the other side of it is, if Chad was a wealthier dude, I think his sense of self-esteem would have been greater. I think his sense of agency would have been greater. I think he would not have needed to lean on an extreme faith derived from his faith as much as he did. I also think he would have had greater agency with women if he was a more accomplished. But having money is just a sign of your agency to some extent, not always, but often. And so I do think it's a lot like the Chris Watts case. If you think about it, money the need for money actually kind of led to these murders. It was like a couple who wanted to get married, wanted to be together, but they couldn't afford it, and there were other obstacles in their way. And the way they got out of it was they murdered and stole and lied, you know. One wonders what Chad's feelings are now towards Laurie and what Laurie's feelings are now to Chad. Do they wish they'd never met each other, or do they feel done in? And how do their family members feel about them? How do their family members feel about the faith that they conjured, and that in a way, you know, was the vehicle in which a lot of this stuff took place? What did Chelsea say? Deborah says, I was just thinking that too. Wealth would have changed something. Yep. Oh, he graduates next year, but he's going to be a rocket scientist. Okay. By the way, I know someone else whose son is going to be a rocket scientist, or at least a aeronautics engineer. So it seems like rocket science is catching on. Wow, look at that. My son got honors, many awards. Congrats to Chelsea's son. So, you know, that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition. Young people celebrating their achievements while older people have tried to cheat their way into a better life. And so, you know, what is the moral of that story? Hard work, proper principles to base your life on, and I guess authenticity. You know, like basically taking the hard, long but right road, not trying to take a shortcut. So the my plan for the rest of my trip to America is basically I'll be heading to Nashville on Friday, I think it is, and Friday night, and then I'll be in Tennessee for a couple of days, and then from there I'm heading to Myrtle Beach, basically for a week of R&R, and then it's a long flight home to the middle of winter back, and that's my plan. I will be at PrimeCon for a couple of days, so if any of you are there, I'd love to meet you, and maybe we can have a cup of coffee, maybe as a group of us. And so please come and say hi if you are there. But I certainly know of a handful of you who are going anyway, so it will be a little bit of a TCRS group, a little bit of a presence there. Well, Flowers of Romance says, my son went to Cambridge from a state school. I take it that's Cambridge, Massachusetts, not Cambridge, England. Will John Ramsey be at this CrimeCon? He will be, and so will Cotton Star. And John Ramsey is apparently giving an interview on Banfield, I think, tonight. So look out for that. I'm quite surprised that Ashley Banfield seems to be in John Ramsey's corner. She mentioned Gary Olive as well. I didn't really watch the whole clip, but anyway, I guess it is what it is. Anyway, so that is the verdict in the Chad Daybell case. Not really any surprises there. Also, I was really surprised that the jury came back quite as soon as they did. I thought it would be maybe another hour and a half or so at about sort of late-ish this afternoon. Anyway, I don't think that'll ever happen, T. Cancella. I don't think that'll ever happen. So anyway, that is it. If you guys haven't already watched my video on the indoctrination of the children, please do that. Meanwhile, I'm going to go just pause the live until the court resumes, which I think might be in the next half hour. So I'll see you guys then. Thanks a lot for joining me, and those who I don't see, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Okay. See you soon, Zircon. Thanks, Joanne. By the way, Iceland, thank you so much for the alert. It was thanks to you that I got the news. I had a couple of people sort of arrive unexpectedly, and so I was a little distracted for the hour or two just before the verdict came in. So thanks so much, Iceland. Really appreciate it. What is going on?
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
Welcome back, guys. Chad needs to, there he comes. Now he's officially convicted multiple murderer. What sentence does he face? Life in prison, the death penalty, life in prison with parole, without parole. Will he get a heavier sentence than Laurie? Should he get a heavier
All right, once the
sentence?
jurors are ready to be brought in, they can enter the courtroom, please.
Seems like the Trump jury deliberated for slightly longer than the DAYBELL jury. The Trump jury deliberated for around 10 hours. The DAYBELL jury, I would say 5 or 6. T. Cancella, I do hope you feel better soon. It's not fun being ill. City 4 charges in the other trial. Yeah. So we're going to now deal with the sentencing phase. Someone made a comment, are we going to hear victim impact statements? I don't think we are. Not today, but that is typically part of the sentencing phase. Remember, it's already 3:15. So I think we're going to hear about a date being set for the sentencing phase. I'd be surprised if there's a huge amount of argument from either side today. But I guess we'll see. I'm not sure if the police did such a great job to begin with, but they certainly, I mean, if they had not found the remains, I think they did a good job with the text and timeline, reconciling the raccoon text took some insight, took some intimate knowledge of this case to figure out what that meant. How many people would come across that text and just ignore it at face value within the noise of everything else, right?
All right, please.
Chad not looking very different to how he looked a couple of minutes ago.
Here's our presentation.
One wonders,
Thank you. Please be
whether
seated.
he expected this outcome.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are back on the record on KCR 22211623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The court notes that earlier this afternoon, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on several counts that are subject to this capital sentencing phase, including in the verdict form counts 1, count 2, count 3, count 4, count 5, and count 6 of the amended indictment. The court at this time then is going to commence with the capital sentencing phase. I'll note that in this case, the jurors have returned, including the juror alternates that are here as well, and the 12 jurors who returned the verdict. Under Idaho Code 192515, subsection 5B, the court is using the same jury to conduct this phase of sentencing also. And that statute reads that if the defendant's guilt was determined by a jury verdict, the same jury shall hear the special sentencing proceeding. So we are in that special sentencing proceeding. As I mentioned, the jurors are here and present. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for continuing your jury service. You've again been seated for your continued service in this case. And that's the matter we're taking up at this time. To give you an idea of just the schedule, the court has some preliminary instructions that are going to be read to you this afternoon. We're going to commence then with further evidence on the sentencing phase starting tomorrow morning after I read these preliminary instructions. And the court's proposal on our typical scheduled plan would be to start at 8:30. Is the state going to be ready to proceed at 8:30 with any impact statements that may be offered?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, that's how we'll run the scheduling at this point then, and I'll inquire as to the jurors going forward. Also, the scheduling we'll have during this phase of the proceedings. They don't need to be limited to the timeframes we've had throughout the trial, including, depending on how long this takes, weekends. So I am essentially leaving up to the jurors their proposed schedule within reason of when we'll work through this proceeding. So the court is going to read some preliminary instructions then to the jurors. And again, you'll receive additional jurors when you retire to deliberate on this part of the case. But for now, the court will just read these and those will be included with you later. So in this case, the defendant in this case has been convicted now of the crimes of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. We will now have a sentencing phase of the trial regarding those offenses. Additional evidence may be presented during the sentencing phase. You should also consider the evidence presented during the trial. Before the death penalty can be considered, the state must prove at least one statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. If you unanimously decide that the state has so proven one or more statutory aggravating circumstances, then you must decide whether the imposition of the death penalty would be unjust by weighing all mitigating circumstances against each proven statutory aggravating circumstance. At a separate proceeding, the court will sentence the defendant for other offenses of which you have found the defendant guilty. Instruction number 2. Your duties are to determine the facts, to apply the law set forth in my instruction to those facts, and in this way to decide the case. In so doing, you must follow my instructions regardless of your own opinion of what the law is or should be, or what either side may state the law to be. You must consider them as a whole, not picking out one and disregarding others. The order in which the instructions are given has no significance as to their relative importance. The law requires that your decision be made solely upon the evidence before you. Faithful performance by you of these duties is vital to the administration of justice. In determining the facts, you may consider only the evidence admitted during this trial and during the sentencing phase. The production of evidence in court is governed by rules of law. At times during the sentencing phase, an objection may be made to questions asked a witness or to a witness's answer or to an exhibit. This simply means I'm being asked to decide a particular rule of law. Arguments on the admissibility of evidence are designed to aid the court and not to be considered by you nor affect your deliberations. If I sustain an objection to a question or to an exhibit, the witness may not answer the question or the exhibit may not be considered. Do not attempt to guess what the answer might have been or what the exhibit might have shown. Similarly, if I tell you not to consider a particular statement or exhibit, you should put it out of your mind and not refer to it or rely on it in your later deliberations. During the sentencing phase, I may have to talk with the parties about the rules of law, which should apply in the case. Sometimes that will occur at the bench. Other times you may be excused from the courtroom so that we can discuss those matters. You are not to speculate about any such discussions. They are necessary from time to time and help the sentencing phase run more smoothly. Some of you have probably heard the terms circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, and hearsay evidence. Do not be concerned with those terms. You are to consider all the evidence submitted during the trial and during the sentencing phase. However, the law does not require you to believe all the evidence. As the sole judges of the facts, you must determine what evidence you believe and what weight you attach to it. If any evidence is admitted for a limited purpose, you are not to consider it for any other purpose. There is no magical formula by which one may evaluate testimony. You bring with you to this courtroom all the experience and background of your lives. In your everyday affairs, you determine for yourselves whom you believe, what you believe, and how much weight you attach to what you are told. The same considerations that you use in your everyday dealings in making these decisions are the considerations which you should apply in your deliberations. In deciding what you believe, do not make your decision simply because more witnesses may have testified one way than the other. Your role is to think about the testimony of each witness you hear and decide how much you believe of what the witness had to say. A witness who has special knowledge in a particular matter may give an opinion on that matter. In determining the weight to give such opinion, you should consider the qualifications and credibility of the witnesses and the reasons given for the opinion. You are not bound by such opinion. Give it the weight, if any, to which you deem it entitled. Instruction number 3. It is presumed that no statutory aggravating circumstance exists in this case. This presumption remains throughout the sentencing phase and during your deliberations. The state has the burden of proving the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance, and that burden remains on the state throughout the sentencing phase. The defendant is not required to prove the absence of any aggravating circumstance, nor is the defendant required to produce any evidence at all. The state must prove the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible or imaginary doubt. It is a doubt based on reason and common sense. It may arise from a careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence or from lack of evidence. If after considering all the evidence you have a reasonable doubt about the defendant's guilt, you must find the defendant not guilty. That in this time then concludes the initial preliminary instructions for the sentencing phase. And the court is going to be in recess then until 8:30 in the morning, when we'll commence with evidence on that phase of the trial. Before we break for the day, does the state have anything further?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further from the defense?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll note that the jurors will remain sequestered during these proceedings, and we'll begin again tomorrow at 8:30. Thank you again for your continued service, and that will conclude our matter for today. Thank you.
All right.
Well, there you have it. Sentencing phase proper will be starting first thing tomorrow, 8:30. But what would you guys say is or are the aggravating circumstances in this case? Any thoughts on that? Hyson says the number of counts, and that's absolutely right. Let's just do this. Just give me a second. So one of the aggravating counts is that it's not just one murder or two murders, but three bodies on one person's property. Another aggravating factor is, if Tylee was murdered and found somewhere else, then that would be one thing, but Tylee was murdered and found on his property. JJ was murdered and found on his property. Tammy was murdered and found on his property. All of those are aggravating factors. Another aggravating factor is that Chad personally profited and benefited from the deaths of the victims in the sense that so just another aggravating circumstances is that not only did he murder someone or conspire to murder someone, he received money improperly, fraudulently from that. That's another aggravating factor. It's actually hard to think how many list all the aggravating factors here. The fact that Chad influenced the minds of another person to act is another aggravating factor. Alex Cox, right? See what some of you guys are saying. The fact that there's a child under 16, the fact that Tylee's remains were burned, right? So I think if you just look at the nature of the crimes, they are especially heinous. It's not just someone who's shot. It is the destruction of bodies. It is also I'm just trying to think about the long period where the children were said to be missing and whether obstruction of justice is really part of that. But I don't really think you need to think very hard about it. In terms of aggravating circumstances, there are so many. So does it qualify as a death penalty case? That's a simple question. Are there aggravating circumstances present to qualify it as a death penalty case? And I think the answer is yes. Not just because of one circumstance or two or three, because there are at least half a dozen, even more. Chad potentially faces death by firing squad in Idaho. It's a pretty scary prospect. I think if there are a couple of different ways to die, I think firing squad's got to be one of the worst. That's also a really good one from Maria. You know, the fact that there was extensive premeditation here, extensive strategy. So it's not just one premeditated murder, but 3 premeditated murders. Elizabeth says, if he gets the death penalty, does that void life insurance? We're talking about for his children. Not actually sure. Not actually sure about that one. I guess it would depend on the insurance policy. Pauline Buckles, it's also a good point. I mean, I think there are some laws governing interfering with the deceased human body, but I don't know whether they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Chad did do did do that. Excuse me. Okay, so I must say I didn't really think the sentencing aspect would be very long today. I'm going to end this live stream in a minute or two. Thanks very much for joining me here. In terms of the sentencing phase tomorrow, I don't think I'm going to be covering it just because I've kind of got other things to do. I'm in Boulder. I actually need to prepare for the next leg of my journey. I can't really afford to be sitting in one place for a long time doing lives. It also disrupts some of the people around me. So I will likely not cover the sentencing tomorrow, although I might, who knows, maybe I'll cover the first hour. We'll see. but I'm going to be traveling tomorrow, and I'll be in Tennessee, and so it depends on am I going to be covering the Chad Daybell trial while I'm at CrimeCon? Who knows? I guess we'll have to see. But in any event, thanks very much for joining me. The verdict is what we all expected, and certainly I think you'd agree with me. There's kind of a sense of relief, satisfaction, but also sadness that at the end of this long period, this long legal slog, we basically just gotten a result that was, I think, quite obvious. Did the prosecution meet their burden? They certainly did, which is why the jury didn't really need to deliberate that long. The last thing I want to say is this case is quite personal to me for quite a few reasons, some that you know about and some that you don't know about. I also attended the trial, Laurie Bellows' trial, for 2 weeks in Boise last year. So, I think about that. I think about seeing Laurie Bellow in person. I think about her levity in court. She seemed to see the whole thing as a joke. And I'm also kind of conscious of this whole thing where, we look at people like Laurie and Chad and the people around them who are misled into believing a fictional reality. But that same thing is happening all over. There are people all around us who are indoctrinated by things that simply aren't true, that believe a reality that's not true. And I kind of want to understand how that happened, why that happened. And that's, to me, a discussion that's not really been part of this trial by many of the people that are participating. And I would have really liked to have had that discussion with my members, but I'm not sure. Maybe people aren't ready to hear that. In a way, that same discussion is taking place in the Micah Miller case, where you're seeing a pastor who's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, two different people, and who's using people's beliefs, there's that saying, you need to believe like a child. But the problem with that is if you're too sincere, too naive in your beliefs, that you can then be manipulated. You can think, you're not thinking, you're letting someone else do your thinking. You are like sheep being guided by a crooked shepherd. And, we need sheep to think critically and not be victims of the wolves that are out there, right? There are also wolves in sheep's clothing to be afraid of. And I kind of want to turn my flock into shepherds of their own kind, people that can help others, remind others to think critically, to think for themselves, that kind of thing. Okay, I think that's it from me. Please watch my video. I'd speak quite a lot about this towards the end of the video, just about this idea of indoctrination. How does it happen? Please check that out. Let's have a look at some of your last comments. Pauline says we can still have that discussion. I have actually written the script out for that quite a long time ago. I must say, when I read it out, it was exhausting. It was just exhausting just to read it out. But I might give it another go. I actually recorded that script just before I came to America. But I remember just thinking I wanted it to have more passion. So who knows, maybe I'll record that again. So Chad is now being held accountable for his misdeeds. Laurie has been held accountable for hers. But what about the system that it came out of? And you get a little bit of an idea. There is a kind of a link between Mormonism and violence. So there's actually a Wikipedia page dedicated to it. And it is actually quite interesting and quite troubling. There's some famous cases involving people literally applying this whole idea of blood sacrifice, but anyway, I'll talk about that with you guys at some other point. Yvonne says, I'd love to discuss when you're refreshed. Good to hear. It is very draining. It is very draining. Okay, guys. Well, we're going into the weekend. I think I said earlier, if you guys are having a good weekend, I'm kind of in the weekend mode myself, just because I'm heading to Nashville and not probably going to be working until Monday. But any of you here going to be at ClientCon? Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm looking forward to seeing Cotton Star there, and we might do a little chat for you guys. We need to talk about that, but that's something to maybe look forward to. Chelsea says, relax for the rest of your trip. Everything can wait. Alison says, thinking critically is so important. I value it highly. We need to teach it to our children. Hopefully people here do that. Yeah. If one person, if just one person in this, think about it, you had a grave digger, a hairdresser, and a washed up stand-up comedian. Just one of those persons had started thinking critically, this wouldn't have happened. If one of the people in their orbit, even Melanie Gibb, had started thinking critically a little bit earlier, if Alex's wife had done the same, that's true of any crime. If someone in that space starts to just observe what is happening and think critically, that ball stops rolling. That ball of uncritical thinking, of wishful thinking, magical thinking, stops rolling, right? Anyway, Iceland says, I'm so excited for you to go there. Thanks, Iceland. I must say thank you again to you for keeping me in the loop. I've had to chase everyone outside of the house here so that I could do this. So I'm going to not continue to be selfish, and I'm going to end the live and let them come back in. But thank you guys for joining me here. This is kind of closure of the sort. You know, I've tried to follow this case, and as I say, I've attended some of it, and it's important for me to see it through to the end, and that's kind of what we've done. I'll try and kind of monitor the sentencing phase and the victim impact statements. We really do want to pay attention to. So that's really where the heart, the emotion need to come through. And I don't think that belongs in the evidence side, but it certainly does belong somewhere. You know, we need to honor the emotional heart of a case as well. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Leah says Kylie was a critical thinker, but she loved her mother. And I guess she was the first victim of all of the, and I guess so was Charles Vella. And that's another case that's going to be heard quite soon. I honestly think Chad should be on the cosh for that case as well. Anyway, Leah says, how do you feel? I feel better than yesterday. Yesterday was a bit of a horror show, but I'm still not where I need to be, but I'm 80 to 85% where I need to be. I just hope that this little piece flying to Nashville isn't gonna, because every time you get onto a flight, you're exposed to germs all over again. People are going to be exposed to my germs. You know, it's not the best way to heal is to rest and stay where you are. Don't forget, we have Alec Baldwin coming up. Indeed, we do. Indeed, we do that in July. So also the Trump verdict was today. I don't know if you've heard, it's come out guilty. So he also faces sentencing. So I guess we'll see what happens there. Thanks, Maria. Thanks very much. Just again, thanks to the mods for being here. Chelsea, Iceland. We saw Stephanie coming in and out as well. Sharon also a little bit. Thanks a lot for being there. So maybe I'll see you guys tomorrow, but if not, take care and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.